There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean, the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another book haul. You know the drill. Why don't we skip all the preambles and get right to the books? I am so behind on filming my book hauls, and that was one sentence of preamble. Here we go. Here I have a book I ordered online by the Indian writer, feminist writer, Mahasweta Devi. Mirror of the Darkest Night, translated by Shamya Dasgupta, translated from the Bengali. I read a short story collection by Devi quite recently and loved one story with all my heart and didn't really care for too much else in the collection, but this one has a different translator. And what is it? This is described as almost an aberration in Mahasweta Devi's works. This is a fantastic, romantic, and thrilling tale. I believe it has some historical basis to it, but it is not a hard-hitting political story, unlike most of the rest of what she wrote. As usual, from Seagull Books, beautiful cover. Here is a book I purchased at a local bookstore on a whim, and I don't remember what that whim was all about, but it's a Canadian writer I'd never heard of, so it may be a debut. It is not a debut. I've never heard of this author. The book is called Semi-Detached by Elizabeth Ruth. It's published in 2023, and the first line of the blurb on the inside French flap is, "Hearts may freeze or thaw, but love never dies." I'm not sure I believe that, but anyway, it opens in December 2013 as an ice storm buries Toronto. And here is the opening paragraph. In an ordinary city full of extraordinary moments, a girl stands outside the Brickyard Bistro at the intersection of Gerrard and Greenwood, cradling a puppy inside an oversized white coat. Her eyes are closed. A howling wind swirls, unwrapping her from a snowy cocoon, delivering her from one storm into another. She sucks in a wintry chill, but feels no air enter her lungs. She opens her eyes. A beguiling white powder spreads out in all directions, and she scans around for anything familiar. There is nothing, no storefronts, not the curve of the road, nor the slant of light cutting across rooftops. Not even the air tastes as it should. Panic pushes through her ice-kissed veins. The last thing she remembers, she'd been running through the whiteout, and after that, she looks to the sky, God's most reliable witness, but a foggy veil offers no comfort. She hugs the puppy closer. The wind stills, silence descends, and in that space between life and death where time collapses and anything is possible, she steps out onto the deserted, glistening road. Before she knows it, she has crossed. The author is a fiction writer and counselor in Toronto. Here's a collection of stories and songs from the Anishinaabe writer and activist Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. And it's funny, I bought this because Brian of Bookish, earlier the same day I was browsing in the used bookstore, sent me a picture of the book he had recently read by the same author. And it wasn't this book, it just had a very similar cover with the same font on it. So anyway, this one looks good too. 2017, opening paragraph of the first story. The story is called Under Your Always Light. After they stole you and you fought your way out, no one was going to fuck with you ever again. Get your own gun, set your own net, shoot your own moose, get 2 husbands and a wife and make them all feel insane with good love. Give birth to a nation in an inglorious way, crawling through feces and urine and dirt and the bloody underbelly of betrayal. Same visit to the used bookstore, Jean Rhys's Voyage in the Dark. This is a lovely, it's not in quite as good a condition as I prefer my used books to be, but it was good enough, and what a lovely cover. This is the one that I read to Alina, and I absolutely loved this novel. I think, what was I reading? A library copy. Originally published in 1934, I think. She's just one of the most gorgeous writers ever. So, I'm not going to read the opening paragraph for the sole reason that it has the N word in it. So you'll just have to read it for yourself, but it's a beautiful book. I haven't been collecting every single book that's coming out from the British Library Women Writers, but I couldn't not get this one. This is called 1 Year's Time by Angela Milne, who is a relative, is it a niece or something, of A.A. Milne. Yes, a niece. Her dates are 1909 to 1990, and this novel was published in 1941. And it is about a single woman who leaps into an exciting new sexual relationship with a man she meets at a New Year's Eve party. My beef with these editions is the print is so tiny that I end up getting the ebook to actually be able to read it, but otherwise beautiful books. Opening paragraph. Liza stirred the brush into the black, treacly depths of the tin and began to paint the floor around the carpet. She stopped to turn the carpet back farther, but it wouldn't stay there. She should have moved the furniture and folded it into the middle of the room, and she should have put on her overall instead of her pink chenille dressing gown, and washed up the lunch things, and put a note in the laundry box about the tablecloth. She thought, well, if I'd done all that first, I should never have started the painting. She looked at the piece she had done. A rich and glossy black floor, a deep-piled carpet in softest plum, gay chintzy curtains, a cushion-heaped divan. Then she looked around the bed sitting room of her flat. There was a scrubby patch on the carpet where she had washed the ink out, and 2 cushions hardly counted as heaping a divan, and chintz curtains weren't necessarily chintzy, and they weren't gay. They were just curtains hanging up. She thought, oh, all those things the newspapers say about what they call bachelor girls. Oh my God, I love that opening paragraph. I've talked about this posthumous novel a few times on my channel, and here is my copy for the book haul video, The School of the Haunted River by Colleen Gerwing, published posthumously and launched just a few months ago. Mum and I went. This was published in 2023 by her lesbian partner, who just was the most darling woman. She just looked like your grandma or mine. And I really loved the excerpts that I heard from this, so I bought a copy. My mum has since read it, and she thought it was excellent. It is about a 2-week outdoor winter snowshoeing trip in northern Saskatchewan with a somewhat elderly naturalist and her niece. I think it's quite autobiographical. I will read the first 2 paragraphs of chapter 1. The plane, a small high-wing Cessna, shudders into life, disturbing odors of former passengers and cargo that crinkle my nose. As we rumbled down the airstrip, I waved to my sister Erica, her words unheard, shaping my name, J, and Dilly's. Goodbye. We pick up speed and take off. The plane buzzes like a fat bumblebee. It's cramped and stuffy, with Bob the pilot, who's built like an offensive lineman, my niece, Dilly, me, and our stuff. I think about nothing that is everything. Like, what if something happens and we miss the return flight? Then the roll call. Toilet paper, extra socks, outdoor tracker. Check, check, check. And the return date, the morning of day 15, a full 2 weeks. Did someone pack sanitary napkins? Extra granola bars? Extra waterproof, windproof matches? We'll need them. Our 2-week snowshoe trip will take us from where Bob's plane will land us at Genuflection Lake, northwest of this tiny airport in Prince Albert, gateway to northern Saskatchewan, to where we'll get picked up at the Sasquatch Annie River, almost straight north. Well, I do like that writing, and I'm looking forward to reading this. This was a book that I brought back from the farm, too. It should have been in that other book haul, but anyway, here it is. It is a Japanese book of some kind called The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter. It's in Japanese and English. It was written in modern Japanese by Yasunari Kawabata, then translated by Donald Keene, and then this book includes lavish illustrations by Masayuki Miyata. So there is side-by-side Japanese and English, and beautiful illustrations. So this is an ancient text. I assume it was written around the same time as the Tale of Genji, probably written in the 9th or early in the 10th century. The authorship can only be theorized about. Here's the opening paragraph. I don't know if it's a continuous narrative or what, but here's the opening paragraph of the first chapter, or the first tale, which is called Kaguya Hime's Childhood. Many years ago, there lived a man they called the Old Bamboo Cutter. Every day he would make his way into the fields and mountains to gather bamboo, which he fashioned into all manner of wares. His name was Sanuki no Miyatsuko. One day he noticed among the bamboos a stalk that glowed at the base. He thought this was very strange, and going over to have a look, saw that a light was shining inside the hollow stem. He examined it, and there he found a most lovely little girl, about 3 inches tall. This was not in the boxes of books that I did that book haul from, so that's why I didn't include it in that. I found this at the little bungalow house at the farm. I must have bought it at some point, but if so, it would have been years before I was interested in or ever lived in Japan. So, don't really know the story on this one, but it's now going to be on my shelf. I bought this thinking that I was going to read it for Victober this year, but Victober just defeated me, that's when my health stuff kind of came to a head, so I had to skip Victober. I will get to this sometime. This is on the list of books I was assigned to read by Thomas, formerly of the Readers, and of Hogglestock.com. It said I needed to read Rachel Ray, so I've got it. One of the Trollopes. The opening of Chapter 1. There are women who cannot grow alone as standard trees, for whom the support and warmth of some wall, some paling, some post is absolutely necessary, who in their growth will bend and incline themselves towards some such prop for their life, creeping with their tendrils along the ground till they reach it, when the circumstances of life have brought no such prop within their natural and immediate reach. Of most women it may be said that it would be well for them that they should marry, as indeed of most men also, seeing that man and wife will each lend the other strength, and yet in lending lose none. But to the women of whom I now speak, some kind of marriage is quite indispensable, and by them some kind of marriage is always made, though the union is often unnatural. A woman in want of a wall against which to nail herself will swear conjugal obedience sometimes to her cook, sometimes to her grandchild, sometimes to her lawyer. Any standing corner, post, or stump, strong enough to bear her weight, will suffice. But to some standing corner, post, or stump, she will find her way, and attach herself, and there will she be married. Well, that's rather intriguing, and certainly potentially very, very sexist, so let's see what it's all about whenever I can get to it. Here is the first novel by the South African writer who has been on my channel several times, Mphuthumi Ntabeni, which is now available in Canada, The Broken River Tent. It was originally published in South Africa in 2018 and published in Canada in 2020 and again in 2021. Bob the Booker and I will be reading this starting towards the end of the year or early next year and having a chat with Mphuthumi Ntabeni about his debut novel thereafter. It won the University of Johannesburg Debut Novel Prize in 2019. We had a discussion with Mphuth about his second novel, The Wanderers, a year and a bit ago. So stay tuned for that. Here is an anthology of Swahili fiction in English translation that's just gorgeous. Look at that. It's called No Edges. It came out this year from Two Lines Press, and I can't even find an editor's name on it. Must be an editor to it. There is no editor noted anywhere that I can see, but the first story is called The Guest by Fatma Shafi, translated by Hassan Qasim, and here is the opening paragraph. It was late at night, and the darkness was far-reaching. The wind was relentless. The rain gushed. The thunder pounded haphazardly. There was the frequent clatter of utensils falling, as unlatched windows closed and opened violently in the wind. Tick-tock, tick-tock, time marched. The girl emerged exhausted from the world of sleep. Getting to her feet, she walked to the window, parted the curtains, and peeked outside. Then returned to bed, pulling up the sheets halfway. She glanced at the clock by the far corner of her bed, 1:45. She widened her eyes in disbelief and looked back outside. Silence. Her head was spinning like a kite. Her nerves were racked. Why hasn't he arrived yet? She wondered, fingering her neck. I hope you can't hear those kids playing. I better shut that window. Here are a couple of books about the British royal family. Princes at War by Deborah Cadbury, and this is about 1936, the abdication crisis, the menace of Nazism, and the stammering King George VI, his brothers, the Dukes of Gloucester, Kent, and Windsor, And the Nazism theme, there's, I think, groundbreaking new scholarship or whatever in this book. So that's why I want to someday read it. I'm a big fan of the Queen Mum, so here is a biography of her by the noted British novelist Penelope Mortimer. I couldn't not pick this up at a charity book sale for $1 or $2. And I think I recently found that Penelope Mortimer's half-brother, obviously much younger half-brother, has recently put out a book about, is it Harry and Meghan or something?
Editing Sean here. No, I've got my Penelopes mixed up. Oh, the plot thickens. Penelope Lively's much younger half-brother or step-brother or something, Valentine Lowe, wrote a tell-all gossipy book about Harry and Meghan and Will and Kate.
This biography of the Queen Mum, originally published 1986, and this is the revised 1995 edition, and I neglected to say that The Princes at War is fairly recent, 2015. Here is a Holocaust novel by one of my favorite writers, Danilo.
The title is Garden Ashes.
I was reading one of his books a year, and then life got in the way, so here is probably the next one I read, translated from the Serbo-Croatian
by William J. Hanaher.
I'm going to read the fairly long opening paragraph. Late in the morning, on summer days, my mother would come into the room softly, carrying that tray of hers. The tray was beginning to lose its thin, nickelized glaze. Along the edges where its level surface bent upward slightly to form a raised rim, traces of its former splendor were still present in flaky patches of nickel that looked like tinfoil pressed out under the fingernails. The narrow flat rim ended in an oval trough that bent downward and was banged in and misshapen. Tiny decorative protuberances, a whole chain of little metallic grapes, had been impressed on the upper edge of the rim. Anyone holding the tray, usually my mother, was bound to feel at least 3 or 4 of these semi-cylindrical protuberances, like braille letters, under the flesh of the thumb. Right there, round those grapes, ring-like layers of grease had collected, barely visible, like shadows cast by little cupolas. These small rings, the color of dirt under fingernails, were remnants of coffee grounds, cod-liver oil, honey, sherbet. Thin crescents on the smooth, shiny surface of the tray showed where glasses had just been removed. Without opening my eyes, I knew from the crystal tinkling of teaspoons against glasses that my mother had set down the tray for a moment and was moving toward the window, the picture of determination to push the dark curtain aside. Then the room would come aglow in the dazzling light of the morning, and I would shut my eyes tightly as the spectrum alternated from yellow to blue to red. On her tray, with her jar of honey and her bottle of cod-liver oil, my mother carried to us the amber hues of sunny days, thick concentrates full of intoxicating aromas. The little jars and glasses were just samples, specimens of the new lands at which the foolish barge of our days would be putting ashore on those summer mornings. Fresh water glistened in the glass, and we would drink it down expertly in tiny sips, clucking like experienced tasters. We would sometimes express dissatisfaction by grimacing and coughing. The water was tasteless, greasy like rainwater, and full of autumnal sediment, while the honey had lost its color and turned thick and turbid, showing the first signs of crystallization. On rainy days, cloudy and gloomy, our fingerprints would stay on the teaspoon handle. Then, sad and disappointed, hating to get up, we would back under the covers to sleep through a day that had started out badly. Well, I think that prose is gasp-worthy. Here is a queer novel in English translation. It's called The Love of Singular Men by Victor Heringer, translated from the Portuguese by James Young. Victor Heringer was born in Rio de Janeiro in 1988, and it is set in Rio de Janeiro in the 70s. A love story between 2 teenage boys. Oh my goodness. This is going to be a buddy read with Joe Smith, I believe. Translation published by Purine Press came out this year, and I can't wait to get to it. Here is a book from Seagull Press. One of those many books I order without really looking too closely at who it's by or what it's about. So it is called Passage of Tears, and the author is Abdourahman Wabari, and it's translated by David and Nicole Ball. Translated from the French. Wabari is a French Djiboutian novelist, poet, and essayist, one of the leading francophone writers of his generation. And this is about a young Djiboutian voluntarily exiled in Montreal. And there's a lot of difficult place names in the opening paragraph, so I won't bother to read it, but now that I have an inkling of what it's about, it's all the more interesting to me. And finally, a debut novel by a Vietnamese-Australian writer who lives in Melbourne called Annam by Andre Dow. Beautiful hardcover edition. This novel won the 2021 Victorian Premier's Literary Award for an unpublished manuscript. The protagonist is a human rights lawyer born into a Vietnamese family in Melbourne, haunted by the story of his grandfather, who had spent 10 years as a perhaps political prisoner, certainly a prisoner in Saigon. I'm going to read the first chapter, enigmatically called C, and it's one almost a page-long paragraph that's in parentheses, so I'm intrigued as all get out. Let's hear the whole thing. If I think of my grandparents now, after all this writing and reading and imagining and remembering, two couples are thrown into relief, their outlines like clay figures in the mud, where so many others are failing to resist the ebb and flow of forgetting. Both couples are elderly and Vietnamese, and live in an apartment outside Paris with their eldest daughter. Both couples have been together 60 years, through 2 wars and many separations. Both speak to me in a mix of Vietnamese, French, and a smattering of English. But one couple speak to me of suffering, loss, exile, forgiveness, and redemption, and the other couple do not. Instead, they are always laughing, with each other and at me, pinching, touching, feeding me, looking at me, shaking their heads and chastising me, praising my plumpness and my height and my grades. This second couple is harder to write, but easier to remember. I think of them as saying to me over and over again, "We want you to be," and also, "Why don't you marry that poor girl?" and "When are you taking the bar exam?" and always, "Eat up, why aren't you eating? Finished already?" I've been trying for a long time to bring the two couples together in my mind, or at least to avoid having to choose between them. And just now, thinking of them, I remember the visit that my grandmother and I paid to my grandfather one late afternoon when he was on his deathbed. He was in a clean beige room in a public hospital, a train and a bus away from their daughter's apartment. He patted the side of the bed for my grandmother to come sit by him, and I asked them once again about the story, expecting them to tell me the usual things. Instead, they chose to sing, something they had never done before and would never do again. An old jazz standard, "I Remember You." But even as I was fumbling to record them on my phone, they were already finishing, lapsing into wrinkled smiles, so that the recording I have is nothing but silence. Oh my God, that's so compelling! Oh! Well, I'm quite excited about almost all of these. Did any of them excite you? Tell me all about it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.